If you want to see your name at the beginning of all of our videos, as well as see exclusive content here on the homestead, please feel free to join our Patreon. Memberships start off at just $1 a month. And as always, thank you for your support.
Use this comment as a jumping off point to a subject. In the video where this comment was, I have gotten some wonderful pet people. And this is my reminder that not all pet people are like this, but unfortunately some are. But they're very upset by the fact that I raise meat rabbits, which is totally fine and cool. Everyone has their own opinions. But I implore you that if you are raising rabbits, be it for meat, for pets, for show, be extremely careful who you sell to. And that's because when you get militant pet people, it just causes problems. For one, you're always going to get this narrative of, I rescued this animal from a horrible situation, and they're going to go on and badmouth your breeding program no matter how good you are. And a lot of them, once they get your information, they get your phone number, they get your address, they start going around your farm, will start harassing you via animal control, or animal rights groups, or the ASPCA, or the local sheriff. Because they feel some kind of way, and they just want to try to either get you to stop or get you in trouble. And a lot of times they do this, they're very young, they're very naive, they don't really understand how laws and regulations work. They're just angry that you're doing something that they don't like. So how do we avoid people like this? We vet. We ask questions, we have questionnaires, we have contracts. If you want to sell to pet people, that's completely fine. Just be very, very careful, especially if you're also selling meat animals. Because I've also had people threaten to come onto my property before. And unfortunately, these are very young kids in instances who don't know tampering with someone's livestock can be charged as a federal felony, and that it just really isn't worth it to even try to do something like that. But again, if you're a breeder, it's not worth dealing with these kinds of people to make a few dollars. Instead, find a cull buyer. Most of the time, they're going to pay you more than the pet people are. And they take care of the dirty work for you because they get a live weight and take a live animal and they want the carcass. Or if you can find a raw feed breeder, that also works really well. Or if you're willing to take the time to do a questionnaire and talk to people over email, over the phone, it's worth it to sell to other people. It's just one of those things where you have to be very careful. There has never been a more true comment when it comes to raising rabbits, especially when we're talking about other animals that are used normally when it comes to domestication for meat. But it's also another reason I absolutely love rabbits, and what makes them so sustainable. You can have a rabbit, and by the time they are 10 to 12 weeks, have an animal that is ready to process for the freezer. Most breeds are ready to breed by 6 to 9 months, and their gestational period is only about a month long. So it means you can get a lot of babies very quickly. But another thing I really like about how fast rabbits mature is if anything goes wrong in your lines. Let's say you do a test breeding and you don't like the outcome of that test breeding, or you have a line that isn't really performing the way you want it to, you're not out on much time. Yes, it sucks that you might be 6 months behind in a project you really wanted to work on with your lines, but that's nothing compared to growing out a heifer that you wanted to breed and she's a horrible mother. The time frame is so short, and rabbits are so forgiving when it comes to the space they need and how long they take to grow and how much feed that they eat, that it leaves room for a lot of error. It's also great when it comes to improving your lines. Because there's such a quick turnaround from one generation to the next, you can make drastic improvements in your lines in a very short period. And I think that's just absolutely fantastic. A common argument that I get is that rabbits should have 100% access to hay, which when we look for the nutritional necessity of a rabbit isn't necessarily true when we have a complete pellet. The reason why you see a lot of commercial settings and breeders using a complete pellet is the consistency within the feed. Consistency of feed equates to a better out product. All nutritional needs are met for the rabbit, and you make sure that they're hitting all their macros and micros that they need to grow and thrive. The problem with just feeding hay is that it doesn't meet all of the nutritional requirements. And because it is such a high fibrous product, we actually see that it negatively affects things when it comes to retaining weight. And that all has to do with fiber and the absorption of nutrients in comparison to that fiber. There's also inconsistencies when it comes to hay when we're looking at different kinds of hay. Are we doing grass or are we doing a legume hay? Is it first, second, third, or fourth cutting? All of which is super important when it comes to the nutrient input of hay. One of the biggest problems we see when people are feeding hay is that protein needs aren't met. And with meat rabbits especially, it's important to meet those protein needs, especially when it comes to a doe that is pregnant and lactating. It's also super important when we look at grow outs, which is why you'll see people switch from a 16% to an 18%. Also in consistency, we ensure that we don't have GI problems. Because the formula is regulated in the same day in and day out, it ensures that the rabbits do not get a change in diet, which is very important for an animal who has a very sensitive GI system and is prone to things like bloat and GI stasis. That consistency is also why you see a lot of breeders who don't have issues with these GI problems, but you'll see a lot of these problems within the pet community. The inconsistency of feed and the constant access to gaseous vegetables and very carby fruits high in sugar can cause problems within a GI tract. And with how highly regulated feed is in the United States, it is quite possibly the opposite of abuse. The very generic answer I'm going to give you is the common fryer weight, which is 5 pounds, which is when we see a lot of people butcher out their rabbits if they're just raising for meat. Now, how long a commercial type rabbit takes to get to 5 pounds is very different. If you have a Californian line or a New Zealand line that focuses specifically on grow out, it can take anywhere from 8 to 10 weeks. Breeds such as my Rex and my Silver Fox normally fill in anywhere from 12 to 16 weeks depending on my lines. So again, it all just depends on your lines, your breed, and what your purpose is for your rabbits. Now, I, as someone who raises show rabbits, have a section that I will cull out my first round when they hit 5 pounds. Normally that's around 12 to 16 weeks. And then my second round will go up to 20 weeks. And then my third round will normally go out around 6 to 9 months, depending on how well they do at show and their potential as a brood animal. My mini Rex, which are mostly raised for show and we use them to feed our dogs, are a little different. And that's just because they aren't a traditional meat rabbit, because they are small. Most of my lines are only about 3 pounds as adults. So for the mini Rex, it all has to do with potential and their type, and if they have some DQs. If they are something I know isn't going to be beneficial to my program, my first cull is 12 weeks. And normally I hold the rest of the litter up until about 5 months. But for the mini Rex, it's obvious not going to do well at show compared to what might do well at show. I've seen this take quite a few times from people outside of the agricultural community, so I figured it'd be a good time to talk about this. I'm pretty sure this is on my butcher video where I talk about butchering an animal out at 5 pounds at fryer weight. Those 5 pound fryers come out of a meat breed like this Rex here. Lucifer is actually sitting at 12 pounds right now. She is a very big girl. But when it comes to Rexes as a whole, we butcher them out at 5 pounds. And it's exactly because of ratios. Because at 5 pounds, we are getting our best meat to feed ratio, and we're getting our best bone to meat ratio. Because when we butcher these guys out at 5 pounds, normally around 10 to 12 weeks, that is going to be the most beneficial time to butcher them. Compared to if we were to wait when they were 10 pounds at normally around 9 months. Some hit 10 pounds sooner, but 9's a good number. And their meat to bone ratio isn't as good either. Because when we talk about sustainability and ethics in farming, it's not just about the animals. It's about the input-output. Just because you're keeping something around for longer doesn't mean it's better for the environment or sustainability. Because more energy is going into the animals than they are giving out. But another thing this commenter is angry about is that I raise mini Rex. So this is my standard Rex, 10 pounds. These are my mini Rex at 3 pounds. Now, for those of you who don't know, my first priority is to get good, showable animals. My top row of mini Rex up here, I have 4 does. Might have 1 to 2 litters per year. Last year, I butchered out probably around 50 mini Rex, and they went to the dogs to feed them. 1 carcass is equivalent to feeding 1 dog for a day for the most part. Now, in comparison to my Rex, my silver fox, and my other commercial-sized rabbits, which yield about 5 pounds, I will continuously breed them. They can have about 4 litters a year, and most of those babies are going to go to butcher. And 1 carcass will feed 2 of our dogs for the day. So when we're talking about numbers, we will cull out more of our 10-pound breeds than we do our mini breeds. But either way, we're always going to have rabbits, and we're always going to use them as dog food and to feed ourselves. Because when it comes down to it, rabbits were domesticated first for meat thousands of years ago. And it's because of our capabilities to domesticate these animals that we have gotten so far as the human race. When it comes to the quail feed, you can ferment it overnight, you can ferment it for multiple days. I normally just put water on it and let it soak for a few minutes just so it's hard to move around. I actually need to go get more water to put on the feed. You can also feed quail scraps like you would chickens. But the biggest thing you want to be careful with when it comes to quail is make sure they get enough protein. And if they're laying quail, make sure they're getting enough calcium to lay those eggs. And then I don't know if this is a tip or not, or if it's just my quail are spoiled little monsters. But my quail like a snack of bananas. Like, bananas are their favorite thing in the world. There are definitely ways to make money when it comes to breeding rabbits, but you're going to see that more on a commercial side. People who are raising very large quantity of rabbits with people willing to buy as cull buyers or selling for meat purposes. If you're doing this on the hobby side, it's a little harder to make money, especially if you don't sell pets. The way I break even when it comes to our homestead, or the way I try to break even, is through the sale of my quail chicks. And then on the off chance I have a rabbit for sale, or I do sell a rabbit, it helps for that month. So for instance, I have 1 buck that's for sale, and I might sell one of my silver fox does from my previous litter when they're ready. And the sale of those 2 animals could in theory pay for my homestead's feed for a month. So to break even, I have to sell 2 animals, or rather 2 rabbits. And any more rabbits I would sell on top of that for the month would just be profit. So there is potential there. I just necessarily don't take advantage of it because of how strict I am about what animals leave the property. I'm more of a quality over quantity kind of person, and I don't have need for a cull buyer because of how many mouths we have to feed. I know this is kind of silly, but this compliment just kind of made my day. Because when it comes to mini Rex, the standard of perfection in layman's terms is ball. The more round and smooth looking your rabbit looks, the closer to the standard it is because of the compact type. So thank you so much. Because it has taken me years to get to the roundness. I know that there is always the arguments of bowls versus bottles, and this year I am trying bowls during the winter just to see if it's any use. And it's great that you can easily get the ice pucks out of there. But one thing I absolutely despise about bowls, other than the rabbits can flip them very easily, even my heavier bowls, is that my does like to dunk their chins and their dewlaps into these bowls. And it's something I have to monitor extra to make sure they don't get a wet dewlap for an extended period of time, causing a bacterial infection on that skin. It's just an extra thing to worry about in the winter, when it is very cold outside and I have other chores I need to do. So when I go to get my new setup, I am definitely going to look at an automatic water system that has heated water. So I can still do almost like a bottle system with nipples, but in a either bubbler or a heated system. Because I feel like this is going to be better overall for them getting enough water while also not doing whatever this is. I will say Velma here is probably the worst about dipping her entire chin into her water. When it comes to deciding culls, there's a few things you might want to ask yourself. For one, how do you want to improve your lines? Are you still making major adjustments in them, or are you just adjusting minor things? Are you only looking to keep does, or do you want to keep a buck? Depending on what you're looking at improving could depend on how early or late you want to cull out in a litter. Then there's the question of how does your line mature? When do certain things that you're looking to improve in your lines fill in? How do your juniors look versus your seniors, and where does your ugly phase fall in on your rabbits? For my mini Rex, I'll do a first cull around 12 weeks. That first cull can include, if I want to keep only does, I'll cull out all the bucks. Then I might look at certain colorations. When it comes to my caster lines right now, I want to keep this nice dark color on the ticking. If you look at the ring pattern, she's a little muddled and lemony down towards the bottom. I can tell how well fur type is on a kit around 4 months. But I might give a kit up to 6 months to really get their adult coat in. For my silver foxes right now, I'm just trying to improve depth. It's very easy to see when something's going to be a tube sock when they're very young. But in general, this part of the rabbit right here takes a little longer to fill in on my silver fox lines. And I might cull out all but 2 and decide which of the 2 has the better loin and the better depth at around 6 to 9 months. So it's just a question of what you're looking to keep in your lines and what you're trying to improve. Velma is feeling very spicy tonight.